You're listening to the Hella Well with Danielle show, a podcast taking women of color on a journey exploring all things wellness and travel related. We're all about showing you how to put on your oxygen mask first and creating lasting self-care habits that will free you to travel the world and live the life you truly desire, and not one you have to fake loving. I'm your host, Danielle Washington. Now let's buckle up and start this journey. Hello, well. How you living today? Today's podcast is kind of continuation to last week's podcast on the inner critic. This month is August, which is National Wellness Month, and I really wanted us to focus in on how the inner critic, that inner judge, that judgment that we do not knowingly, is affecting our lives so we can live hella well. And so last week we talked about, where does it come from, this inner critic, and where does it begin, and the birth of it. And this week I really wanted to talk about the trance of unworthiness. But before we get going on there, I wanted to first say thank you to everyone that attended the Comedic Connections event that we had last Sunday. It was beautiful. I'm so happy you guys were able to be there. If you weren't able to be there, I will send you the link in the show notes so you can get the replay on that one as well. But also last week I started off with just tuning in, and I was like, I kind of like doing that. So I think I'm going to just every episode just have a moment of tuning in. So I want you to get in a comfortable position, close your eyes, maybe turn off any background noise that's going on, and just start noticing your breath, breathing in, breathing out. And then allowing yourself just to kind of seeing the breath coming in, seeing the breath coming out. And then I'm going to invite you to do what's called box breathing. So we're going to breathe in for the count of 4, hold for 4, and then we're going to breathe out for 4. And when you're breathing in, think of it as this breath is in this elevator and it's going all the way to the top, and you hear this button that says ding, and you're holding it at the ding as you're getting out. You're removing whatever needs to be removed as you're holding the breath for 4 counts. And as you're exhaling, you're letting the breath go all the way back down to the bottom of the elevator. And again, releasing whatever no longer is serving you in this moment. So let's get this breathing party in, and let's tune in so we can get this knowledge. So we're going to go in with breathing in the count of 4. So breathing in, 1, 2, 3, 4. Hold, 1, 2, 3, 4. Exhale, 1, 2, 3, 4. Exhaling everything out. Then we're breathing in again. Breathing in, 1, 2, 3, 4. Hold. 1, 2, 3, 4. Exhaling it all out. 1, 2, 3, 4. Last time, breathing in. 1, 2, 3, 4. Hold. 1, 2, 3, 4. And then exhaling. 1, 2, 3, 4. And allowing your breath to just go back to its normal breathing pattern. And noticing the breath, breathing in, knowing you're breathing in. Exhaling, knowing you're exhaling. Letting the body settle into this moment. And let's begin this podcast episode. Thank you for tuning in with me, breathing with me. I sometimes feel like we need to do that tuning in to let go the lower mind. So we're having a lower mind take several seats so we can be here and be present, taking away the noise of the outside world. And I think that's so important, what we're talking about today, the trance of unworthiness. And this topic it's hidden a bunch of triggers in my world. And so me doing this, I felt resistance behind creating this podcast. I felt resistance behind wanting to share this knowledge because I'm like, it means I had to face some things in me. And I'm like, oh, I kind of don't want to face those things yet. Or I am, but I'm not. And I was like, can we procrastinate? We're not ready. We're not ready. But I was like, okay, we got to do this. Not that we have to do this, because that's me shooting on myself. It's that I get to do this. I choose to have this conversation. Because the trance of unworthiness, I mean, I can look at it a couple different ways. I look at it, and I have never been a drug addict, and I don't necessarily know the life of one, but it almost feels like that kind of trance you may see someone that's on crack. But the way I more relate to this trance of unworthiness is I think of Ike and Tina Turner. I don't know if that dates me, but I remember seeing the movie. If you know the story of Tina Turner, she was in an abusive relationship with Ike. And, she smiled in everyone's face. Everything was good. But she was in this trance of unworthiness that oftentimes we feel when we're in an abusive relationship. And I feel like the inner critic, this relationship we have with the inner critic, especially when the inner critic is dominant, is our abuser. And we are the ones who are being abusing ourselves in this situation. But it's hard to see sometimes. And what I mean by that is I feel like the trance of unworthiness, before I even go any further, is considered like this fixed belief or this fixed negative belief about yourself, is that this belief that you're flawed. And it comes from Tara Brach, who is amazing. She's written a couple different books, Radical Acceptance and Radical Compassion. If you haven't read any of those books, or just listen to her talk, she has podcasts, she has different things on YouTube. She's just phenomenal. Like, I love the way she thinks, and she comes from a perspective of, let's not be passive about it, but there's a situation that's in all of us. It doesn't matter. You can be the most confident person, but there's levels and degrees of this feeling of this feeling of unworthiness and this trance of unworthiness. And though you may be this person who's very confident and I feel worthy, I'm good, like I have the world on my shoulders, or I don't have the world on my shoulders, like I'm good, I'm confident. But there may still be areas in your life where you're still not showing up fully. And so I say this to say, just because you may feel very worthy in your life, you may be surprised how this trance of unworthiness is showing up in a way that you aren't even able to see. And that's one thing I really wanted to kind of get into today, because I felt like in me thinking about this podcast episode, I was like, oh, dang, I didn't see how I'm still, like, I know I'm stuck in the trance of unworthiness. I think it's something I have battled with, and it's a war that I'm constantly fighting, but I'm at a different level. Like, I've won many battles of this trance of unworthiness, but there's still times when I'm realizing, even in my attempting to heal, I'm coming from the trance of unworthiness that I don't think many of us think about. And that's one thing I loved about Tara Brach when she's talking about this. This trance of unworthiness is this overwhelming feeling that our inner critic has us thinking, and this dominant inner critic has us thinking that we're genetically flawed. And it goes with the shoulds. I've talked about the shoulds before. Like, I should be this way, I should do things that way. And when you're shooting on yourself, what that's coming from is that, abusive inner critic who is taking control, and you're in this trance that has conditioned you from society saying you should be a certain way. And that's the trance that's put you in. If you aren't the certain way, then you're unworthy. You're not good enough. I'm not there yet. I need to be doing better. I have to be in a certain way. And there's this fear of deficiency, this fear of not being good enough and not being worthy enough, that puts us in a prison. And I almost think being in an abusive relationship is a prison that we may not always choose to be in, but we just can't find our way out. And finding ourselves in this prison of our thoughts that we're constantly flawed prevents us from being the amazing beings that we were supposed to be. And I even should say supposed to be. The amazing beings that is our divine birthright. No one, and as I mentioned in the last podcast episode, no one is born flawed. Well, okay, not flawed, like not flawed mentally. Like we all have something, whatever, but it's what makes us unique. Mentally, we are not born deficient of, worth. We're not born deficient of worth. We are conditioned through, and we talked about this in last week's episode, where it comes from, through the conditioning messages of society that to be successful, to be filled pretty, to be, enough, you have to be a certain way. And the messengers usually were our parents or influential adults or siblings. And that's how our inner critic was birthed. But there's so many consequences behind this trance of unworthiness that I really wanted us to talk about. Because again, I don't feel like we even realize how it's showing up in so many different ways. And like going back to last week's topic, and if you didn't listen last week, I encourage you to go back and listen to it before you kind of jump further into this one, because I feel like they kind of go together. But like we did talk about different survival strategies that we all have. Some of us have ones that this is a test that we create to prove that we are valuable and we're worthy, whether it's, a test on appearance, on finances, on achievements, or whatever it is. And so for me, one of the things I realize is that part of my unworthiness, of me trying to not realizing that I'm in this trance of unworthiness that feels so freaking heavy, is my wanting to self-develop. And I didn't realize that in me doing all this self-development, learning about, Reiki, doing yoga, learning about, meditation, going on trips, negative self-talk, and all the different things, reparenting, and how to be more confident, how to love myself, self-mastery, listening to Deepak Chopra and all these different people who are all amazing, doing acupuncture. All these different things are amazing and are helpful. And I'm not saying not to do it. But what I realized in doing this is I'm doing some of this stuff out of this feeling, out of this thought, out of this fixed negative perception of myself, this trance of unworthiness, that I need to do these things because I'm flawed. And think about that. A lot of things that we go to church, some people, or we believe in a spiritual practice because we feel flawed and we're like, I feel flawed and I need to go somewhere to help me with this feeling of feeling flawed, this feeling of being insufficient. One thing I love about Tara Brach, she has so many great stories of people that she's worked with. And she talks about this one story of this woman and her mother, and her mother was in a coma for a really long time and comes out of the coma for a second and, is lucid for a minute. And she says, all this time I felt like I wasn't okay. I wasn't worthy. And she has this beautiful awareness after coming out of a coma, probably about to die soon, to say that I wasted most of my life feeling unworthy and not realizing it, not realizing she had been in this trance of unworthiness that most of us, and it's not like a subset of us that are in it, most of us have it in some, or experiencing this trance of unworthiness in some level or another. And again, just aren't realizing. I think being busy is an effect of being in the trance of unworthiness. It's us saying, I need to do more to be valuable, but not tying the two. And I think that's the problem. Like, we're not tying the need of being busy to be busy. I gotta keep going, because if I don't keep going, if I don't keep showing up, that I'm not going to be deemed worthy. I'm not going to be good. I'm not efficient enough. I'm not enough. And that plays into this trance that we are in. And I love that she talks about a trance, because I do think it is this zombie-like moment of feeling like we live in the shoulds. And so the shoulds are the trance of unworthiness, that we don't realize that the thoughts that we have, these fixed negative beliefs that we have and that we're operating from and making decisions from on a day-to-day basis aren't even ours. These decisions, these messages of the shoulds and the inner critic judging us to kind of keep us in our place and keep us comfortable, keep us safe, are coming from messages that aren't even ours. And we don't even realize the effects of that. We don't realize that we're in this trance of unworthiness and how much it is jacking up our lives. And like even playing this role, like I feel like as a woman, a Black woman, especially in corporate America, I find myself playing a role. And even if I discredit all those different things, I myself feel like I have been leading a divided life. I've been leading one life as one person, one life as another, and none of them ever being my true self because I felt like I needed to hide who I was because who I was wasn't enough. And if I was exposed, if my deficiencies were exposed, then, oh my God, what would people say? What would people think? Would I lose people? Would I be alienated? And it's exhausting. And being in that trance of unworthiness is exhausting. But if you aren't paying attention to the numbing signs, the feeling of needing to be constantly busy, the needing to play a role, you're still in the trance. You're still in the trance of unworthiness and going about your day thinking that you're good and not realizing that you are literally a walking zombie of unworthiness. And I say this I'm not saying that I have conquered this completely. I'm not saying that I've never experienced this because I am. That feeling of being obsessed with achievements, if that's something that you're dealing with, that's an effect of that's a sign of being in the trance of unworthiness. And that kind of goes back to that strategy the survival strategy I was talking about last week, that I need to achieve a certain amount to be seen, to be acceptable. For me, it goes back to being a victim. And that's one of the things that I have had to deal with that has showed up in my, survival strategy. It's like I had to be a victim to be seen. I had to be a victim to get attention, to have people show up for me. And that was how I showed up in this trance of unworthiness. And the thoughts were that, no one understands me. Oh, everything happens to me that's horrible. Like nothing good happens. And I unconsciously was attached and addicted to things being difficult because that was the only way I felt accepted. That was the only way I felt loved. That was the only way I felt seen. And that's just one survival strategy. There's so many different ones. But for me, that's my survival strategy of how this dominant inner critic showed up and how I have been in this trance of unworthiness. And it's funny because I had to feel broken to get attention and love. But on the flip side of that, and what was really happening is this issue was backfiring in my face. Like, okay, let me be the most broken person. You have a problem? Oh, let me show you how my problems are worse than yours. And what it was doing was I had people who were friends of mine, and I can sit here now and say that I had friends leave my life not because of something different. Like I was this horrible friend and I couldn't, I didn't care about them, but because I was exhausting to be a friend to. I was exhausted to be a friend to because it's hard to help someone who you don't feel like you're making a difference. It's frustrating and it's exhausting. And it sometimes it just becomes too much of an effort. I say this because I've been on the flip side of this, of trying to be a friend to someone who's in a victim space. And it just was energetically so much that I was like, I can't do this. And I didn't realize that I was so deep in the trance of unworthiness that I was playing the same role that someone else was playing on me. And I was like, I can't, sis, I love you, but I can't be around you. And I had this need for why I was doing this victim mode of feeling that I had to be this dire person to get attention, to be seen, to be loved, to be acceptable. But what I wasn't seeing is by needing to do this or needing to feel a certain way, I had to put myself in position like I need to be away from everyone else to prove that I am broken. So my need to be accepted, my need to be loved was backfiring in the sense that I had to push people away to even then get to the point where, okay, now I'm the victim. Now you could try to come near me, but now they're like, no, I don't have time to be near you because that's too much work. And it's exhausting. It's exhausting. And that's just one way, one of several ways this trance of unworthiness shows up. And I talked again earlier about, the sake of being busy for being busy, playing roles, being obsessed with achieving. And I see that in my father. I feel like my father has to show his value by doing so many different things. And then you have other people who use, they use alcohol, they use food, they use drugs, they use relationships, they use work. I mean, I have used work. Again, it goes back to that being busy that leads to these unhealthy behaviors and just adds on to more suffering. And it makes you feel abandoned. You feel alienated from other people. When you don't believe you are worthy of love, you're worthy of attention. And that's when you really want those things. But when you feel you're not worthy of it, you're pushing other people away. You're pushing yourself energetically away. And it sucks. I mean, I don't know anything else to say, but the trance of unworthiness is an abusive relationship that is it feels so hard to get out of. It feels there's such a grip because it's what you know. And you can't blame yourself for being in the trance of unworthiness because again, this is what you've known and this is how you survived as a child. And the survival method that was utilized, this inner critic that was utilized to keep you safe, protected from embarrassment, from rejection, is no longer working out for you as an adult, but you don't know any other way. If you've been living in this trance for so long, it's hard to see you're in the trance. And it's even hard to figure out, well, how do I get out of this trance? How do I move past this? How do I get out of this quest for perfection or betterment and realizing that this quest for perfection and betterment is really just me still living in the trance of unworthiness? How do I get to the point of realizing that my unhappiness, this extra stress level that I'm experiencing, anxiety or emotional distress, this feeling that I can't go out and become this amazing speaker or start this crazy business ideal. And even the word that I'm saying that it's crazy is feeling that I'm not worthy of taking this risk. Living in the trance of unworthiness stops us from our really acting out on our creativity. It stops us from being the divine, amazing, beautiful beings that we were born. Instead, we live in this emotional distress that, oh my God, what if someone finds out the truth that I'm really not this good? And that's why I felt about so many of my jobs. I stayed in so many deadbeat jobs because I was fearful if I went somewhere else, I wouldn't be able to trick people that I wasn't as smart as they thought I was. I wasn't as skilled as they thought I was. And I felt like for most of my time in most of my career, especially in corporate America, I found myself trying to work undercover of they just don't know. I've beat them all. They haven't figured out that I'm not worthy of being in this position. Oh, so they want to pay me this low rate? I'll take it because if I try to get more, they may discover that I'm not efficient. They may discover that I am not worthy of these things. And I have done so many things in my life out of this fear of deficiency. And it has been my prison. It has been this thing that has kept me stuck for so many years of my life that it has had me got to the point where I have been suicidal. And that is part of the trance of unworthiness. It feels again like you're in an abusive relationship. Like, it's never going to get better, so why should I live? It's never going to get better. Why? And in me trying to push myself out of this level of, my boundaries, my comfort level means I'm setting myself up for rejection and failure. Why would I do that? So I should just stay in this comfort zone. I should stay in the shoulds. I should stay in the shoulds, which, stops me from pursuing new opportunities. It stifles my potential for growth. It stifles my potential for meeting a partner, meeting friends and people who I really love, because I'm too afraid if I show too much, someone's going to hurt me, or someone's going to realize I'm not as good as they might have thought that I was. They're going to expose me to my unworthiness. So I need to keep people at a distance. I may want you close, but I need to keep you at a distance. And it keeps us separate. At the end of the day, what the trance of unworthiness does the most is it keeps us separate from life, from the ones we love, from our dreams, from our destiny, and more importantly, it keeps us separate from our authentic selves. We put a mask upon a mask upon a mask, hoping that no one will see through all these different masks, to realize that we aren't as good as we may show on the outside, and that we just aren't good enough. The shame of feeling that we aren't, the self-hatred. It is just self-hatred. And like I question and ask you to ask yourself, how many moments of loss have we lost in self-hatred? How many moments have you lost? How many moments of doing some amazing things in your life, taking risk? How many moments of joy have you lost from self-hatred? How many moments have you lost from hiding who you are out of fear of being exposed, of this feeling of not being worthy? Think about all those times. And I don't say this to say, think about these times and go deeper into the situation. I say, think about the times that you lost. Think about that woman who was a coma, who finally is at her deathbed, is feeling like, oh my God, I lost so many moments thinking I wasn't good enough, and probably playing back in how she would have lived life differently. How would you live life differently if you were able from this point on to find a way to have a better relationship with your inner critic? Instead of fighting against it and fighting this war, how can you find peace within life with your inner critic? Because the inner critic is there. Inner critic is a part of who we are. I don't think it ever goes away. I don't know. I haven't seen the research that anyone says it goes away. I could be wrong. I'm not saying I've read everything under the sun, but it is a part of who we are. So knowing that it's part of who we are, and knowing that there's this trance of unworthiness, well, how do we find a way to not work against our inner critic, but work with our inner critic? And a huge part of that is, first and foremost, accepting, well, not even accepting, it's the awareness that you're in the trance. Me becoming aware that even through my self-development, that's still part of the trance of unworthiness. Having that awareness is, I'm like, okay, I'm aware. I'm aware that I'm still utilizing my feeling of unworthiness in the disguise of, I'm doing better. Look at me. I'm trying to level up. Even the ideal of this, I'm gaming myself to level up, leveling up even more. I'm going to let me upgrade you, is me saying, I need an upgrade because I'm not enough. Me saying that I need to be a certain way, me living in the shoulds, me living and accepting the conditions of society, is me saying that I'm still unworthy. And, feeling that I need to be perfect is this feeling of and striving for perfection is a sign of the unworthiness trance that many of us are living in, feeling that you have to constantly be doing and multitasking and to show that you're worthy, being preoccupied with achievement, obsessed with success, and addiction to having a certain status is still living in this trance of unworthiness, avoiding being vulnerable or disclosing things about yourself because you are afraid you're going to be exposed. Like, oh my God, they're going to find out something and not like me. Is this in our signs of this unworthiness trance? But when you're able to get to a point of just saying, okay, hey sis, I think you're in the trance of unworthiness. I think I'm living in this trance of unworthiness. I feel that this feeling of unhappiness, all the stress I'm feeling, this substance abuse that I'm using, this using wine, and it may not feel like a substance abuse, like feeling like you need to constantly drink wine to dull the moments, to numb yourself. This feeling that I can't try to go too far in life because, I may, get rejected and because, I'm not worthy enough, I may be exposed. Is all something that we all grapple with at one point in our lives, no matter how strong your self-worth is. There's an area, and it may even be for a moment, but there's an area that will show up where you have these moments that you're living in the trance. And what you do with that awareness is what we're going to talk about in the next episode next week. Next week, we're going to talk about where do you go once you, okay, dun, 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 I'm aware. Where do I go next? How do I work with my inner critic and the self-judgment that's been there since I was a child to have a partnership with it, to radical acceptance? So I hope you will join me next week. I am really looking forward to the conversation. In the meantime, know that living in the trance of unworthiness, being in this abusive relationship with our inner critic is a choice. It may not feel like a choice, but it is a choice. There are ways to get out of this abusive relationship into a healthier relationship with your inner critic and a dominant critic, but it's a choice. And next week we'll figure out what are the choices and how to kind of move through it. I would love to hear your thoughts and how this trance of unworthiness has affected your life. How you've seen affect other people's lives as well, and start thinking about ways it's affecting your life and what can you do, or what do you want to do, or what would life feel like if you were not in the trance of unworthiness. And let me know. Send me a message, write a note. If you got anything out of this podcast, please leave a comment, rate it. I'm not too proud to ask for 5-star ratings, but let me know how this is going for you. Send me a note on social media, any which way. This is an open conversation. I want us to have a conversation about stuff like this because I feel like I'm tired of hiding. I'm tired of feeling like I need to hide because I'm going to be exposed as being a failure, being flawed. And I want this podcast to be an open dialogue and a safe space for you to share you without judgment. There's no judgment here. So I love you. You are worthy. And I just want you to know that I love you. Have a good day. Talk to you soon. Ciao. Thanks for joining us this week on the Hello Well with Danielle show. Make sure to visit our website, hellowellwithdanielle.com, where you can subscribe to our show on iTunes, Spotify, and Amazon Music and never miss an episode. Also, you can follow us on social media at Hello Well with Danielle on Facebook and Instagram, and Hello Well Danny on Twitter. And if you like hella love the show and got some good nuggets out of it, know that I'm not too proud to ask for you to please leave a rating or review on iTunes so that we can continue to expand our reach and help other women of color. Again, thanks so much for listening, and I hope to see you next week. Ciao.